Hey guys, welcome back to my channel where today I work on God of War in Blender Part 2. Right now I'm applying materials to all of my assets that I'm currently working on, and those materials are going to be blue and everything that is completed is going to have a green material. It's just kind of this little project management thing that I'm doing right now to keep myself organized and inspired, so if you want to see that down below, just leave me a little message in the comments and I'll be watching for that, and maybe I'll make a little quick video on how I'm keeping myself inspired and organized so I'm not just jumping to the next project and getting overwhelmed with this one. So I'm starting off with the Witch's Altar table. It's a little table that's found on the left-hand side of her room or house. It's pretty beat up and it's just something where she's doing a whole bunch of witchcraft and projects on, so naturally it's going to be a little torn up. I'm keeping the base and the tabletop separate from each other so I can go and manipulate them individually in Sculpt. So right now I'm working on my tabletop. Something that I do want to keep in mind is the limitations that I have as an artist and my style in particular. I know that I can't go in and make this crazy, fantastic, realistic looking table in the timeline that I'm giving myself to finish this project, so I'm going in and I'm making it a little more stylized and something that I can handle with more ease. When you're looking at these images for inspiration, like this one from God of War from Contreras, you have to know that these guys have been in the industry for a long time and have spent a long time perfecting their craft, so don't become discouraged if your stuff isn't turning out exactly like theirs. Find your style, find your pace, and make it your own, right? So now I'm going into the base of my table, and I tried kind of sketching in some runes on the side that you'd find within the game, but it just wasn't really working with my mesh. Yeah, and so now I'm going into the bottom of the table, into the foot of the base, and trying to add a little more wear and tear to that, since that naturally is going to be knocked into the elements around more than the rest of it. Now I'm creating this barrel chair. Now when I tell you that I thought this chair was going to be the easiest part of my day, it ended up being the biggest pain in the ass. I went in, cut the barrel, made a little backside seat to it, which I will ultimately just get rid of at the end because I was getting kind of tired of it. Now I'm making these little brass accents that will strap around the barrel itself. Took the barrel and now sculpting in some cuts, and found out I was going the wrong direction. You gotta cut into the grain of wood. So I ended that, was re-sculpting, remeshing. I was just having a lot of trouble here. In hindsight, what I could have done is probably just added a displacement map within modifiers, or adding in an image on top and using a shader, or I don't know, going in and messing with some node editors, but I decided to sculpt this out and it just wasn't turning out the way that I wanted it, so I ended up just getting rid of it and starting over. So when I started over, I decided to make every piece of the barrel modular to where I could manipulate them individually and none of the information would bleed over from the sculpts. This ended up working really well. I did a whole bunch of cut loops within the barrel to kind of give it that round, pudgy shape within the middle, and decided to start sculpting with that and remeshing it. I sculpted down the corners, making it look a little more stylized, and going in with the Sculpt Draw tool and cutting through the wood grain and kind of creating some tree age circling around. I love how this barrel turned out. It was a little more stylized than the table itself, but it all looked pretty cohesive at the end. This is when I got rid of the back end of the chair. In hindsight, I think that was pretty smart of me to do, because at the end of this day, this little altar, once again, is not going to be the focal point of the scene, and I just need to have my timeline in consideration and knowing what is good enough, and this was good enough, and I really like how it turned out, and it looked pretty good together with the table. Now I'm going up and I'm scaling the table to where I think the chair would look good. You could sit and put your knees under the table, all that good stuff. And I went and re-looked at her table and I saw there was some bowls. So I made one bowl, duplicating it and resizing to where we have multiple and they all look individual, they all look unique. Doing the same thing with a cup. Cups don't really change, right? So you only need to make one and then just manipulate the size later. Now I decided to start setting my scene a little bit with the little assets that I had made and starting to make my candle. 1,000 ways to make a candle, but this is the quickest one that I found. and just thought, this is the easiest and is working within my workflow that I already had for the day, which was just a lot of sculpting and remeshing. After I make this one candle, I'm going to go through and I'm going to resize and scale and make them look like a whole bunch of unique candles by rotating them as well. Don't forget that you're going to want to really look into this and do that with most of your models. I decided to make this drinking horn that was also found in the image, but it looked like croissant and looked like shit as well, so I just got rid of it. Because I was like, no, we're not throwing a croissant in the scene. And if you look back at the image, where the table is sitting is not on like a perfectly placed platform. It looks like there's a little bit of rock poking through. I thought this would be a perfect opportunity for me to go through and set the stage for my rendered images, so when I'm selling the scene as an individual piece, it's gonna look really good. So I did the same thing. I cut down the corners of just a regular cube, extruded it out, copy, duplicated, all that stuff, and I'm adding it in my scene. Now I'm stretching it through to where the table sits on the lower end of the rock, and we have some height for the chair so you can see the chair a little better when it's going to be rendered, as well as placing my candles in all four corners of the scene, since the candles are going to be the locations where the light is going to be held. Now I have a candle in the front left corner of the table. I'm giving it some height where they're sitting on the barrel, bringing your eye to the back of the image where it's sitting on that lower rock, and then also on the lower right hand side. Overall, the renders turned out beautiful. I love how this table and all these assets just kind of were completed. My next video, I'm going to be going through and optimizing all of these models and stamping the high resolution, the high poly mesh onto my low poly mesh. So don't forget to keep watching for that. Thank you so much, and I'll see you next time. Bye guys!